Welcome in to the 48 Minutes podcast on Believe. I'm Ross Geiger, the former NBA video coordinator, and I'm joined alongside Bruce Bernstein, our four-time Emmy Award winner, who spent more than 3 decades at ESPN producing NBA shows, SportsCenter, and soaking up knowledge from the best hoop analysts in the business. Also joining us is the 2-time Emmy Award winner, Michael World B. Freer, who's a senior writer at Stat Factor, specializing in writing advanced statistical NBA reports for various announcers across the league. This is episode number 176, the Sean Bradley episode, as the 7-6 Bradley wore number 76 for 3 seasons as a member of the Philadelphia 76ers. Now, with the regular season set to begin on October 21st, we continue our series of 2-a-day shows. They'll be shorter, and we'll release 3 new shows each week leading up to opening night. Each show will feature 1 team from the East and 1 team from the West. So let's get started with World B Charlotte Hornets for the East, and then we'll get to the loaded Houston Rockets from the West. But World B, before we started taping here tonight, you had something to say about starting the show off with the Hornets.
Oh, well, I was just talking about, I guess, the reason we're starting off with the Hornets because we haven't gotten the Washington Generals preview done yet, trying to figure out if they'll ever beat those darn Harlem Globetrotters, but we'll save that for later on in our 2-a-days.
Yeah, we'll keep that one in mind and have that one in our back pocket. But let's talk about these Hornets, World B. Last year, they went 19-63, finishing just 1 win better than the last place Washington Wizards in the Eastern Conference. Now, LaMelo Ball, who is their best player, franchise face, and floor general, played in just 47 games last year to make those matters worse for Buzz City. Their rising star and second-year wing, Brandon Miller, played in just 27 games. So this summer, this team wisely brought in some backcourt reinforcements. They added Con Knipple and veteran guards Spencer Dinwiddie and Colin Sexton. But while these improvements were made to the perimeter, I still have some serious doubts about their interior, as the Hornets dealt Yusuf Nurkic to Utah and successfully traded Mark Williams to Phoenix on their second attempt to unload the young big man, which leaves the 5-man duties this year up to Moussa Diabate and veteran Mason Plumlee, who makes his return to Charlotte. So this East might be a bit more wide open this year for many teams in the Eastern Conference, but I fully expect the Hornets to return to the lottery once again next year. What about you?
I disagree. I think they have a legitimate chance to be a contender for a play-in spot, if not a playoff spot. This team, it's all predicated on health. You mentioned the fact that LaMelo Ball and Brandon Miller just haven't been healthy. In 2 seasons, they've only played, in Brandon Miller's 2 seasons, the two have only been on the court a little over 800 minutes over the course of 64 games possible. Yeah. So there's just not a lot of time there. And, they were good when the two were on the court together. I think their offensive efficiency was about 114 points per 100 possessions, but you only got 20 games out of them or so. So it's such a small sample size. But I really think the additions they brought in, they have some legitimate talent and legitimate depth if everybody stays healthy. When you talk about a pair of guards that are 6'7" each, that's a matchup nightmare for a team. No other team can boast that, a pair of guards going 6'7". And you mentioned the interior is an issue, but I have high hopes for Diabate as a player. He played limited minutes last season, but he was very productive. Couple of things. They got to get their defense. It's just bad. I think it's going to get better with under Charles Lee in the second season. They made improvements. Still a bottom 10 defensive team efficiency wise, and the offense is just putrid. There's just no other way to put it. But with guys healthy, maybe they have a shot. Their depth is a little better than it has been, but if they're going to be all injured, then that depth becomes starters, and you got a problem. But if they're healthy, they can contend for a postseason spot.
Now, for our listeners or watchers on YouTube, Bruce, you are in the middle between World B and I. So what side of the fence do you land on with the Charlotte Hornets?
The Hornets are still a young team. They're going to need time to gel. They won 19 last season, as you mentioned. And I think they're going to probably win about 30 this year. So that's a significant improvement. but we're not looking at this year's version of the Detroit Pistons. They're a year away from that, I believe. But they have a nice young head coach in Charles Lee, begins his second season with the team. He's considered one of the bright young coaches in the league. They were the worst offensive team in the NBA last season. Not one of the worst. They were the worst in both points scored and team field goal shooting percentage. Defense, as Worldby said, they were somewhere between bottom 10 and bottom 15, depending on which stat you choose to look at. So their defense, if their offense can sort of catch up to their defense, they'll be competitive. 30 wins, I think, is reasonable. But it always begins and ends with LaMelo. I mean, They have put some interesting pieces around him with Miles Bridges, Brandon Miller, the three rookies. You mentioned that their hole at center after Mark Williams is gone. Ryan Kalkbrenner is somebody who played decently in the summer league. But again, he's a young 7-footer. He's not coming in there and becoming a dominant force in the paint. But because of some of the young guys, Liam McNeely from UConn, Knipple, Kalkbrenner, some of the younger guys or some of the other guys they picked up, like Sexton, Pat Connaughton from Milwaukee, who's a nice veteran guy that can come off the bench. They'll be an interesting team. They're not going to be a 19-win team this year, but they're not going to be a 38-win team either, I don't believe.
Yeah, good point there. Now, World B here, going back to Diabate, you mentioned him being a guy that could really have a standout year and surprise some people, being the starting center for the Charlotte Hornets. So for all our listeners that might play fantasy basketball, do you think he's a sleeper for a late round pick in a fantasy basketball draft?
Yeah, I do. It's really predicated on the kind of minutes he gets. His production per 36 minutes was really impressive. He's an outstanding offensive rebounder, and the guy gets second chance points. He's not a guy they're going to run the offense around. They're not going to run plays for him, but he's going to have to clean up on the offensive glass to get his points. But I think his rebounding, his shot blocking ability, if given more minutes, absolutely has a chance to be a late round sleeper fantasy pick. We'll see how it goes minutes. I expect him to be the starter to begin the season. He's athletic enough with that group. I think he can get up and down. And like I said, he's a really good offensive rebounder, and that's where he's going to get his points.
All right, then keep an eye on him in preseason. That is Diabate, because this is a type of team where I feel like the preseason actually matters a lot as Coach Charles Lee tries to work out his rotations, try new things, and we should get a good look at this young team and pretty much playing some of these younger guys starters minutes in the preseason since there's a lot of development going on in Charlotte. But good point there, World B. All right, and let's go ahead and shift our attention over to the Western Conference and discuss the Houston Rockets. They are in a much different spot than the Charlotte Hornets because, last year they finished with the second best record out west, going 52-30. And this summer, their offseason moves made it very clear they're doing everything in their power to overtake the Oklahoma City Thunder next season in the West, Bruce.
Well, after the Rockets bottomed out with just 17 wins in the 2021 season, the Rockets have increased their win total in each of the last 4 years. They went to 20, then 22, then 41, and as you said, 52 last season, second behind OKC. But, the Thunder won 68 and the championship.
Yeah.
So I don't expect the Rockets to make up 16-game gap this year and overtake them. But I will say this, they're not going to finish 16 games behind Oklahoma City this year. Obviously, the big move, the big swing was bringing Kevin Durant in, but they also brought in, Dorian Finney-Smith and Clint Capella. And there's a talented young core, Alpi Şengün, who played great in Eurobasket, Jabari Smith, Amen Thompson, Tari Eason, veterans Fred VanVleet, Steven Adams, and second-year guard Reed Shepherd, who we were all looking to play well last season. Never really got his act together, but I think this year he's probably going to have a chance to do that. So, look, Durant is the scoring machine. He's a great team defender. He's 37. His clutch shot making late in games is something Coach Ime Udoka needed pretty much more than anything. So I expect KD to be just as effective as ever, but willing to score fewer points if it helps the younger guys grow in their roles.
All right, well said there, Bruce. World B, what's your thoughts on the H-Town Rockets?
I mean, they're in a win now mode, even with the young guys. You don't bring Kevin Durant in to, become down the road. You're in it to win now. They saw the kind of talent that Bruce mentioned. They go up to 52 wins last season and they were outside of the Thunder, they were the team in the West, and but they still couldn't get out of the first round. They didn't have enough offense to get through Golden State, and albeit in 7 games. So you bring in Kevin Durant, as Bruce mentioned, their offense wasn't great. It was better, but when they got into the clutch minutes down the stretch, they scored about 9 points per 100 possessions less because they didn't have a go-to guy. Mm-hmm. And now you have the guy in Kevin Durant. He's getting the ball. He's going to make something happen. So if you're a Rockets fan, you got to really feel like you're the main contender to the Thunder right now in the West. The other thing is they went out and signed, not just Kevin Durant. They signed Jabari Smith to big bucks.
Yep.
And people were kind of surprised about that. But I'll tell you something. Their defense really was at its best when Jabari Smith was on the court. When he got hurt and he missed about 5 weeks, I believe, or a month to 5 weeks last season, the defense took a hit. When he came back, they were really solid again. So they need him, and they recognize that. And then he signed to a contract that, kind of opened everybody's eyes. So they, as Bruce mentioned, they have the pieces to be serious contenders in the West. Can they get enough shooting? I question exactly how much perimeter shooting they have to compete in this league and with teams like the Thunder, whatever. But if they can do that, they can absolutely challenge out West.
Yeah, and Jabari Smith Jr., as I've mentioned before, he could play some small ball 5 at times to really kind of stretch that floor and help with that perimeter shooting, because that is one of their weaknesses. You look at this roster, do they have the shooting depth? Hopefully Dorian Finney-Smith can come in and to the rescue here with that, but they're going to need a big year from Fred VanVleet, as well as people try to space the floor for KD on his touches around that elbow area. Now, for me with the Rockets, though, this is still, in my opinion, the deepest team in the NBA. They've got 2, if not 3 deep at every single position on their roster, with a great mix, actually, of both younger talent and very experienced veteran talent. Kevin Durant, as you guys both mentioned, was their big offseason splash. But out of all the contending NBA teams to enter next season, the Rockets absolutely were the team that desperately needed to add a closer to their unit. And having KD in those crunch time minutes down the stretch of games next season should be a real difference maker for this group that already plays great defense. I mean, they've got some solid defenders on the floor, so they can get the crunch time stops. Who's going to help them put the ball in the basket on the other end? That's where KD comes into play, and I think they're going to be a scary team next year. Bruce?
One of the things that I love about this team, I love their 3-headed monster at center. You've got Şengün, who's kind of like a poor man's Jokic. He can make plays for other people. He can score. Mm-hmm. He's not a great defender, but he's acceptable. Steven Adams, who's like the strongest man in the NBA, sets hella picks for guys. I mean, Kevin Durant's going to feast off of some of the screens that Adams sets. And then you've got Clint Capella, who's a shot blocker, a rebounder, still got a lot of like spring in his legs, even though he's north of 30 now. Şengün's was an all-star last year. He begins his 5th season. He's 23 years old. I love their center rotation. You mentioned being 3 deep at many positions. They are really deep at center.
And the other thing is, as you mentioned, Bruce, what does that mean to be so deep at the 3 deep at the center position? They are the best offensive rebounding team in the league last season by far. 18 second chance points per game. That's a ridiculous number. If you average 110 or whatever points per game, you're getting almost 20 of those through second chance scoring. That's a big deal. Now, where are they going to have the same opportunities if they're, with KD there and Jalen Green gone? If their, percentage goes up, maybe not, but they're still going to be a solid offensive rebounding team. And so that's where your center matchup really comes into play.
Now, last question for you, Bruce. You mentioned you don't think they could possibly overtake the Thunder, or at least don't like their chances to do so. However, with that said, would you be surprised if the Rockets don't finish second again out west?
Oh, I totally expect them to finish second, and I expect them to be in the conference finals against Oklahoma City. And just because I don't think they're going to, make up 16 games in the standings does not mean that I don't think they can beat them in the playoffs. Because that's a much different situation there. Yep. Injuries, et cetera, et cetera. So, no, I mean, to me, there's nobody that I see that's better than Houston, with the exception of the Thunder.
Yeah, those OKC Houston matchups this year are going to be definite must-watch TV. So lots of fun to come with those matchups. Now, on our next 48 minutes to a day, we'll examine the Chicago Bulls and the Los Angeles Clippers. We hope you'll join us, as we'll still keep you up to date, but go shorter than 48 as we hit every team. Take care, everyone.